Welcome to the first annual Appalachian Trail Arts and Culture Festival, presented by the Appalachian Trail Museum and the Earl Shaffer Foundation. The festival is a chance to celebrate the Appalachian Trail community talents, creativity, and ties, and will bring together authors, historians, storytellers, journalists, musicians, designers, and videographers. The day's event was held at the Furnace Stack Pavilion at Pine Grove Furnace State Park. What better place to host an event than at the halfway mark of the Appalachian Trail? Also at this location is the Appalachian Trail Museum, which is the only museum in the country dedicated to hiking. The event consisted of several panels throughout the day. The morning event included many authors who shared their inspiration, insights, and funny and interesting stories of their life on the Appalachian Trail. The second panel of folks brought some first-hand insight, stories, and the poetry of Earl Shaffer, the first thru hiker of the Appalachian Trail. The following includes the first two panels of the event.
Good morning, everybody. So, welcome to Pine Grove Furnace State Park and the Furnace Stack Pavilion. I'm Larry Luxenberg, president of the AT Museum, and in a minute you'll hear from Sanne, the president of the Earl Shaffer Foundation, who's co-sponsoring the event. So a year ago, the museum and the Shaffer Foundation sponsored a storytelling contest. And this is sort of an outgrowth of that. This is a broader event, and we're hoping to build on this and make it an annual arts and culture festival and get participation from the varied talents in the AT community. We have one storyteller today, musician, but there are photographers, all sorts of talent and people in the AT community. And we're hoping to build on this in future years. So we have four panels today, and at noon we'll have lunch, the Earl Shaffer Foundation, and their Star Grill Master are providing lunch for us today. Our first panel will start in a minute with our moderator, Ed Riggs, and four current authors. Then we have a panel on Earl Shaffer. After lunch, Gwen Luce is going to moderate a panel with some AT historians, and finally Warren Doyle is going to talk about his 50-some years hiking the AT. So anyway, thanks everybody for joining, and thanks Karen and Shannon, our videographers today, who have a wonderful blog, Wander Out Yonder, and they often feature the AT Museum. And I want to especially thank Julie Queen, the museum manager, for all the efforts for organizing this today. Sanne?
Well, there's not a whole lot to say, gratefully. My name is Sanne Larson, and I am the president of the Earl Shaffer Foundation, and we are just delighted that we're pursuing this program, and we want to get this on the road and make sure that we have lots and lots of participation, and this becomes an annual event. We're so glad you're here. We have 6 of our 12 board members present today, so we're really excited about today's event, and we hope you enjoy yourselves. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us. So with that, I'll introduce Ed Riggs, our moderator, and he can bring the first panel up. Ed's one of our longtime volunteers, a 2,000 miler, and among many other things, he's a hiking columnist for the Gettysburg Times. And he's got a great hiking column that comes out every other Monday. So, and Ed is multi-talent and particularly well known in Gettysburg. So, Ed.
Thank you, Larry. I'm going to introduce our panelists. They're going to sit here, and I'm going to ask each of them to bring their book or one of their books up, just to sit in front of them. And this is going to be a conversational type of thing, and I think it'll be enjoyable that way. And I know I'm going to learn a lot. I've already learned a lot reading about these four, and I'm sure you'll learn a lot as well. So I'm going to bring them up. We have Mike Rader. Mike has the book Altered on the Appalachian Trail. And if you've hiked on the Appalachian Trail, you can completely relate to that title. Mike hiked in 1973. So that was a while ago, and there weren't that many thru hikers back then as there are now. We have Shayla Paradise.
Yes.
And Shayla is a triple crowner, and she is hiking the trail right now. She took a break to come here, and she's hiking the AT for the third time. And she's written a book, what's it called? Footprint of a Heart. That's a pretty great title too. So Shayla. And then we have John Turner. John has written a book with another interesting title, Killing the Buddha on the AT. And you'll find out what that's all about as we talk with John as well. And then we have Lee Lovelace. Lee's written 3 books on the Appalachian Trail. Has not thru hiked it, which nobody holds that against you, so don't worry about it.
Yeah, you say so.
I always tell people come into the museum and they'll say, "Oh, have you hiked the trail?" And I'll say, "Yeah, I hiked the whole thing." And they go, "Oh, I haven't." And I say, you don't have to feel bad, just to get out there and hike is the whole point. So, yeah. So here we go. I'm honored to be in this conversation with these 4, and I've not read any of the books yet. I'm going to read all of them. In fact, my wife said to me when we came here, she said, "I hope you brought your wallet because I know you're going to buy all these books." And I am. But I'm honored to be in conversation with these this morning with these 4 wanderers, pilgrims, artists, authors, and searchers. And I think you all would maybe identify with those particular descriptions. And I say all that because that's my impression anyway. I've not had any long talks with these people. I've introduced myself to them. And like I said, I've not read their books yet, but I'm absolutely going to. I've not walked with you, though I do feel like I have. We have this common bond with those who hike. I've hiked the whole trail. I finished in 2014. I've hiked about half the trail a second time. I'm privileged to volunteer here at the museum. And as Larry said, I write a column for the Gettysburg Times. I'm a wanderer. I'm a searcher. I'm all in with the AT. So my first question for the 4 of you, and we'll just start here with Mike, is why the Appalachian Trail?
Well, for me, when in my late teens and 20s, I had this gripping desire to find myself, to figure out who I was. And I kept pushing it down and pushing it away until I couldn't do it any longer. And I actually gave up a college education to go hike the AT, which was the best decision in my life. I tell people that one of the best decisions in my life was not to go to college, but crazy as that sounds, for me, it was the right decision. And I was reading a Reader Digest article that talked about hiking the entire Appalachian Trail, and I always loved the outdoors, and that article was my inspiration. And I thought that using the Appalachian Trail as that stage would help me figure out who I was. And not only did the AT tell me who I was, but while I was on it, the AT altered myself also, and not only altered me, which I never saw coming, but altered how I would live the rest of my life. So I received many gifts and lessons from the AT. So again, probably one of the best decisions of my life Not in front of Mary and my wife, of course. My wife, Tom, of course.
Always have to put that. Great. Shayla, how about you? Of course, Shayla is way more than the AT. She's done the Triple Crown, but
So,
that's still why the AT?
why the AT? Why the AT again and again and again is a good question for me. And at the back of my book, I have my afterword, which is top 10 reasons the AT is the best trail ever. I'm not going to read it to you right now because that would be self-indulgent, but I do just want to say that from 10 to 1, it's rain that is warm rather than life-threatening in like the Rocky Mountains or something. White blazes, which I think are incredible. Towns, culture, variety, water, just having so much access to water. Hostels, I think probably the greatest phenomenon maybe in the world that I've seen so far is the hearts of the people who support hikers and how much they can keep giving and giving and giving and giving, and hostel owners are like a master class in that. It just, yeah, it amazes me. The fact that it's a green tunnel. Like to get to be protected from the sun for an entire summer is so dreamy. And I'm in love with the Mountain West. Glacier National Park is my home, and I adore the Rocky Mountain ecosystem. But when it really comes down to it, these are the oldest mountains in the world, and their heart beats because we walk it. So, yeah, that.
I like that.
Yeah.
John, why the AT?
Well, good morning, everyone. The simple answer is it's in my backyard. I live in Georgia, and I'm about 45, 50 minutes from Springer Mountain, where I live. So it's there. And I was thinking about this just a minute ago. When I was a teenager in high school, I think 1966, Buddy and I had the crazy idea. We heard about the Appalachian Trail. Let's do that. And my parents said, no, you're going to college. So that's what happened. And I didn't do it. But in 2015, I retired from a job that I really loved. It was very stressful. And I needed something. I didn't know what, but I needed something to do two things. Get my head where it needed to be and get my body where it needed to be after a very, very stressful job. Well, the Appalachian Trail is, as I say, in my backyard. So my wife said, why don't you go do that? So I did that. I went up and did a little piece. And the very first time I was out there, I encountered two things. Number one was a guy with this monster backpack trekking along and stopped and said hello, and he's headed to Katahdin. And it blew me away. Katahdin, where's that? I did not know. I found out. And it was amazing. The second thing that happened to me was, on the same hike, I ran into some guys with hard hats and tools. They were maintaining a section of the Appalachian Trail, Georgia Appalachian Trail Club. And if you don't know, there are 31 clubs, nonprofit clubs, that maintain the trail from Springer, actually from Amicalola, all the way to Katahdin. And that's what they were doing. And so I talked to them, and the next thing I know, I'm on the trail, I'm hiking with them in their little day hikes. They've got a hard hat on my head, and I'm digging in the dirt, and the rest is history.
Very good. All right, Lee.
Yeah, before I answer that question, just let me give you a warning. This is my first panel, and I don't speak well in public, so I apologize ahead of time for the awkwardness. Back in the early 2010s, I took my wife up to a cabin on the Blue Ridge Parkway in Virginia for Valentine's Day. And when I was checking in, the owner asked me, I asked him, what kind of things are there to do around here? And he said, do you like hiking? And now I had done some day hiking before, but I didn't even know about the Appalachian Trail. I'd heard of it, didn't really know what it was. And he said, there's a little local trail called Crabtree Falls that you might like, and here's a map. Well, he gave me one of the section maps of the AT. So I did the Crabtree Falls, which was great, but then I started looking at that map and realizing there's a trail that goes all the way from Georgia to Maine. That is awesome. So I started looking things up. Back then, blogs were the most thing before blogs came along, and I started reading a lot of blogs, and I said, I gotta go out and do some of this. You know, I was working a full-time job, so I went out on long weekends, did some backpacking, met through hikers, and what I found out is I have a little bit of social anxiety. Sometimes I have some depression, but when I'm out on the trail, both of those things disappear. I'm able to talk to people, you know, at shelters, at campsites at night, and it just seemed amazing to me. It was almost like a drug that, you know, I didn't have a hangover from the next day. So that's basically why the AT for me.
Great. All right, I have a particular question. Yeah, thank you. I have particular questions for each of you, so I would encourage, if I'm speaking to one of you, if the other three have something you would like to add, just pop right in there. I'm going to start with Lee. Lee's written 3 books, Sawyer's Run, The Last Hike, and what was the third one?
Tales of the Arvidians.
Yes. Yes. I'm most interested in, from what I read about, the Last Hike. And I'll let Lee tell you about it, but can you just tell us what the premise of the story is?
Well, the premise, of course, and hopefully this ain't too long of a story. In 2017, I was entertaining the thought of a thru hike the next year. And as part of a prep for it, I went out to do 2 weeks on the trail with my son. And on the 3rd day, I passed out on the trail, and you know, maybe for 5-10 minutes. But I was feeling really bad, ended up having to get off the trail, even though we came back and finished it 2 weeks later. But in the hospital, all they told me was, we don't really know what's wrong with you, maybe you didn't drink enough. So, you know, I'm beating myself up. I had to get off trail just because I didn't drink enough water, right? But as days and weeks and months rolled on, I started getting a lot more sick, a lot more lethargic, a lot tighter. And basically I went from climbing mountains not to be able to climb the steps of my own home. And it took a good another year to figure out that I had a liver disease that was going to require a transplant. And as the days, or as the months and years rolled on, because that's not a quick process, I got sicker and sicker. And what was it, in 2022, early 2022? No, 2021, Labor Day. I did just a 2-night hike in the Shenandoah National Park, and it almost killed me. And I realized that I couldn't do any more overnight hikes until I got that transplant. And it kind of bummed me out. And I was in my tent the last night, and I thought about how would a guy with a liver problem ever do a thru hike. So I decided to take some of my own experiences that I've had section hiking the trail and turn it into a fictional book about a guy with a liver problem hiking the Appalachian Trail. So that's where the last hike.
All fiction.
But there's parts in there. There's characters that are actually people I met through section hiking in 2021, and then there's totally made up characters. But I put a lot of myself into a couple of the characters in there that are fictional. So that's basically how I got started on this one.
So is this book about a man's struggles?
Definitely.
Or is this book about the Appalachian Trail?
It's both, but basically, this is a guy who was on his last leg. He's going to go out, he's going to thru hike, and he's a loner. And he expects he's going to be a loner, but it doesn't turn out that way. He gets a tramley that he never wanted. So I talked to a lot of tramleys. I've seen how they form sometimes, you know, through osmosis. And so I tried to I haven't experienced the tramway life myself, except for being trail angels for people that we follow up the trail. And I tried to pour that into the book. So he ends up getting a family he never wanted, basically.
I think a lot of people can relate to physical conditions keeping you from doing what you'd like to do.
Yeah, it's spoiler alert, I got a liver transplant in December of 22. And I was good for about 1.5 years, and then I had a rejection episode last year. And it kind of took me back down to square one. And I'm now just getting back to where my health level is enough so I can get back on the trail. So besides actually breaking a collarbone a few months ago, I'm going to start getting back on and filling in some section hiking. I've only ever done section hiking in the southern area. Maryland was the furthest north I've ever gotten. So now I'm in Pennsylvania. I've got to put that on my list. And I plan on going up the rest of the states just to at least do some section hiking in each of them. And then next year, I'm going to plan a thru hike it too.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you. I love the title of that book too. That's intriguing to me because you really never know when your last hike will be.
Good point.
Yeah. All right, John, killing the Buddha on the Appalachian Trail. Can you please tell us what that term means, killing the Buddha?
Usually my response to that is, well, you got to read the book. But I'll tell you what any of us who have hiked the trail for any length or period of time, such as Lee has, knows exactly what this is because it's happened to them. They just didn't have that term. Killing the Buddha comes from an expression from a 9th century Chinese monk who told his disciples, if you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him. Well, what does that mean? Obviously, the Buddha's been dead a long time, so we're not, harming anybody. What it means is you're carrying something in your head that's in your way. It's an obstacle. And until you get rid of it, you're going to have a problem moving forward. So it's getting rid of that obstacle. Well, on the Appalachian Trail, how many obstacles are there? A few. They're in your head, they're on the ground, they're in the sky, and they come at you in waves sometimes. And each time it happened to me, especially in the beginning of my hike, my response was, oh, this is awful, and I want to go home. I don't feel good, this hurts, da-da-da-da-da, you know all that. For some reason, I kept going. And that's what killing the Buddha is all about. Now, you would think that experienced hikers, people who've done 1,000 miles maybe, or like this lady, 3 long-distance hikes and 3 times on the AT, you'd think that eventually that wouldn't happen anymore. But that's wrong, because you have to do this over and over and over and over on the trail. And when you think about it, that's what life is all about also. Lee has encountered it. All of us have. So that's the title.
That's fantastic. So killing the Buddha on the Appalachian Trail, there's a subtitle to that, walking on through self-doubt and aging.
Yes.
So that fits in exactly with what you're saying.
Yes, I finished the trail at age 73, which I thought was pretty old. It's not. Not at all. There are people who are older who've thru-hiked the whole trail. But it still felt pretty darn old when I finished it.
Everything feels old now, doesn't it?
Yeah, it gets harder. So when I encounter people, particularly young folks, who may come to Amicalola Falls State Park and think, I'd like to hike the trail one of these days, my response always is, do it while you're young. Don't wait. Do it. Do it. And as Mike will tell you, it alters your life.
Absolutely. And your section hiking to complete it was 5 years?
Yes, it took me 5 years. One of those years was the COVID year, and I did not hike very much that year. It was just too difficult, and in many ways, it was not safe. So I took that year off. So really a little more than 4 years.
How important was it, particularly in this particular way that you hiked it, how important was it for you to complete every step of the trail?
Yeah, that's a great question. I started out with no idea whatsoever of doing the entire trail. In fact, I was hiking with some friends down in Georgia who did want to go all the way and would tease me about, well, you're just out here. And one by one, they sort of fell out, and I did the whole trail. I don't know why that happened, but at some point, and I imagine this happens to a lot of people, whether you're a thru hiker or section hiker, at some point, somewhere along, getting close to Virginia, it dawned on me, I could do this whole thing. Maybe. Why not? Why not try? And once that little idea clicked in my head, it went from, yeah, maybe, to, oh, yes, I'm going to do this. Because in my experience, the necessary ingredient to go from Springer Mountain to Katahdin or Katahdin to Springer is a fierce determination to do it. If you don't have that, you won't make it.
That's right. Where did you end? Did you end at Katahdin?
No, I did not. I ended at a little trailhead called in Stratton in Maine. And the reason is I had blocked out time with other commitments that I had back at home. I blocked out time to do my hiking. When I got to Maine, it was too far for the time that I had allotted. So I had to do Maine in pieces. And I had to skip a part. And the part I skipped was one of the toughest ones. If any of you remember the mountains, Moody, Old Blue, Bigelow's, remember those? Oh, well, that's the part, the Crockers, you know, those I had skipped. So I did that last, and I finished at Stratton Trailhead.
If you had not finished the trail, like say the last section where you finished at Stratton, if you didn't quite, would you still have killed the Buddha?
Yeah, because you have to do that with each thing you encounter, each obstacle you encounter. But it was not an option for me. I was going to finish that trail, period.
I know that feeling. Great, thank you. All right, Shayla. She has a book, Footprint of a Heart, and she also has a website, which I encourage you to go to. And she's also a musician and a hiker. So. All right, on your website, you say you identify as a wild animal.
Yes, that's
and that
right.
you are a lover of trees, people, and being alive.
Mhm.
How have your hiking experiences helped you develop that self-awareness?
Yeah, well, it's a practice, right? So just the repetition of getting to live that way over and over and over again has really helped to wash off some of the things that I thought I was and come down to what feels like a more raw and authentic version of myself. For many years and hopefully soon in the future, I lived in a cabin in the woods and chopped my wood to stay warm and gathered my water, and just having a connection to the process of staying alive is really important to me. Anytime I can grow my own food or get my hands in the dirt or just however we can have at least some of our lives in it is really ideal to me.
Or boil your own water for the dehydrated food.
Yes, sure. Yes, that too.
All right, so you're hiking the AT for the third time now.
I am.
Where, and you took a break to come here. Where are you now? What do you have left?
Yeah, I'm southbounding and I've made it to Caratunk. So I just started on June 13th.
Okay.
Yep. And then I walked up almost to here, not quite, to Highway 233 from Harper's Ferry. So got a little chunk in before I came.
This is a question I've always wondered, and I haven't never asked anybody this. What's it like starting at Katahdin?
Yeah.
Because it's such an epic finish.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you got to walk up there just to start.
Yeah, it's peaceful. Like, you feel something in your heart. Like a Katahdin gives you this little like pat on the back and sends you on your way. It's really, and that was hard for me because I love so much getting to finish at Katahdin. So that was the main factor when I was considering both ways this year. But it's peaceful. It feels really beautiful. And I'm really enjoying the woods of Maine, just because that's where I left off. So to come right back, there's something to it, some kind of reciprocity to it that I'm really enjoying.
And it's great you're able to compare too. There are differences going north and south, not only in the terrain, but the people you meet, the services you are afforded as you're going.
Yeah.
That'd be interesting.
And to not be able to go fast is really good for me. Like, my body's not ready to do big days, so it's like, I'm gonna be here.
Yeah.
This is great. It's gonna take me 8 days to walk across the 100-mile wilderness, and other times I've done it the first time in 3 days, the second time in 4. So, and 4 was me slowing down, so it's just really nice to not be in that shape, and get to take my time. And I mean, I could just do that naturally, right? Just take your time, but it's amazing how much programming I'm still deprogramming for those kind of things.
Well, you're young too, so it's hard to deprogram that.
Well, it's not like society's slowing down either, so.
Right. No. Very good. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Now, Mike. You hiked the trail in 1973.
Yes.
And I think Larry told me there were 85 people that completed that year. And nowadays it's in the thousands that complete it in each year. So it's a little bit different back then. But why did you hike the AT in the first place back then? Well, you sort of said that as you were leading it, but what made you say, I'm going to go do this when nobody else is doing it? I mean, there hadn't even been much written about it at that point.
You know, like I said earlier, I was reading an article in Reader's Digest. It was 6 pages. I still have the article, and the title was "Hike the Wild Appalachian Trail" by Dennis Farney. And when I read it, it was kind of a light bulb moment for me, because again, I had been really struggling with this deep desire to figure out, you know, who I was and what stuff I was made out of. But I kept pushing it down, pushing it away, until I was getting to the point at 21 years old where I just couldn't do it any longer, and I had to finally face it. And I thought that the trail would be the way that I could get the answers that I was looking for. So that you know, we talked about motivation and determination, and personally, I think to hike any long distance hike or the Appalachian Trail specifically from Georgia to Maine, I think you need a really compelling reason. And my compelling reason was to figure out who I was. And that was my motivation the entire way, and it became my mission. After I wrote the book, I can't believe how many times in my book I referred to my journey as my mission, because that's how I saw it then. But the other rewards were, in the article it says, at the time it said less than 100 in the world had hiked the Appalachian Trail from Georgia to Maine, and I thought that to be a member of that elite club would be awesome. But that had nothing to do with why I hiked it. And the other reason that worked out well for me is I struggled with my weight as a kid all my life. I was overweight and struggled with it greatly, and the trail took care of that for me. I lost 100 pounds hiking the Appalachian Trail. Yeah, I started the trail at 240 pounds, really out of shape, really flabby, and I came off the trail at 140 pounds of solid muscle. As a matter of fact, the other thing I kind of laugh about is I played football in high school, and I played at defensive. At 240, I was a defensive lineman. And after high school, my buddies and I, we stayed on a league and kept playing, and until I left for the trail. And when I came back at 140 pounds, when I tried out for the team, they made me a wide receiver. So who gets to be a defensive lineman and a wide receiver in their football career? You're probably looking at the only guy. The trail, you know, if you're open to it, and certainly I was, because I was looking for something from the trail. Besides looking for something for myself, I was looking for the AT to give me back something, give me back answers, and I can't recount how many gifts and lessons that I've used the rest of my life that I learned on that hike. It was amazing.
That's very true, and that leads into another question I have. Do you attribute all that to the Appalachian Trail, or do you attribute that with your attempt to seek peace with a pilgrimage of sorts? Did it have to be the AT?
It didn't have to be the AT. I don't think. I just happened to. Again, I've always loved the outdoors. I've always been an avid fisherman and hunter and outdoorsman, and you know, always camped out, tented and hiked, but never, of course, to that extent. And always had a love of the outdoors. So I think for me it was a natural fit, but I don't think you need the AT specifically to at that age to answer those kind of questions about yourself. And I think one of the greatest gifts that anybody can give themselves is to really, truly understand who they are. There's nothing like knowing who you are and being yourself.
So it didn't have to be the AT, but in this case, it was.
Yeah, in this case it was, and I feel fortunate that it was.
So why 52 years between hiking and writing a nice book?
I gotta blame my wife for that. Donna's really into her family history and genealogy, and she has spent and still spends countless hours on Ancestry.com, and she's got her ancestors coming over from England and settling into, I think, starting in New Hampshire all the way to the 1500s so far, and so we're talking one day, and she said that, she looked at me and she goes, you tell everybody that you hike the Appalachian Trail from Georgia to Maine. And of course, that's what we do for the rest of our lives. We let everybody know. She says, but you never talk about the particulars. She goes, I'm sure there's a lot of great stories, but she goes, even I don't. As long as we've been married 40 years, I don't know any of those stories. And she says, you know what would be really nice? And I went, what's that? She says, do you still have your journals? I wrote extensively every day on the trail. And I said, of course I do. I can put my hands on them in 30 seconds. I said, I'll never get rid of those. And she says, if you would take the time to write your story of your hike as a legacy piece for our grandson Mason, so that he could read that and understand what his grandfather was all about. She looks at me and she goes, how great would that be? And that was absolutely the trigger. I honestly, I got up from my chair at that moment. I walked into the office. I took out my journals. I started writing, and I didn't stop until 2 years later until I had a manuscript. And when I got it all done, I pushed my desk chair back, and I looked at it, and I looked up at her, and I said, I think this is more than a legacy piece. I says, I think I just wrote a book.
That's great. That's great. Oh my gosh. Well, I think Larry picked the right person to moderate you, because I can identify so much with all four of you. You're all, you're at a different stage of life than the three guys here. But you and I, we have this common bond, a seemingly common set of values. What role do you think that being out in the woods and nature, among the forests and the trees and the mountains and the streams and the lakes and the meadows, what role does that fulfill in our society today? Hiking in general, but maybe the Appalachian Trail in particular. And whoever wants to answer, feels ready to answer. Okay. John.
I've thought about that a lot. In our society right now, and for a long time, nature has been what's out of window. It's what we look through the windshield. It's what we hang on our walls, a pretty picture. That's nature. We adore it. We adore those Ansel Adams photographs of Yellowstone. We adore the idea of going to a national park and pulling off on one of the overlooks and seeing these wonderful vistas. And to us, that's nature. When you hike the Appalachian Trail, it's different. Nature's bugs. Nature's poison ivy. Nature's rocks. And sometimes those rocks want to hurt you. That's nature. And so you begin to pretty quickly, I think, have a different understanding of what nature is. And what that leads to, or at least in my experience, what it led to was, you know what, there's nothing but nature. That's all there is nature. And being out there for 2,197 miles of the Appalachian Trail, you're exposed to nature in all its glory and all its misery and every dimension you can think of. And we can't think of all those dimensions. Our minds are not equipped to completely understand the complexity of nature. So a hike of the Appalachian Trail, or any trail, I'm sure, leads to this conclusion. There's nothing but nature out there. We're in it, we're part of it. And what the heck are we doing to it?
Go ahead.
Very good, thank you.
I see the opportunity so much all the time. I'm completely dedicated to bringing nature indoors so that those who can't get out to it are experiencing it. I really believe that everything is a vibration. And so as a storyteller and a songwriter and a poet, to me, I can take somebody to the Shenandoah River by singing. And I believe that's my responsibility in this blessing of a lifetime, to get to walk and talk. But I also believe that the next ones want this so bad that I nannied 13 children, and there is no better way than to get them outside. That is what they crave, that is what they want, and that is what they're asking for. And I don't know what to say about the directions it seems we have gone, but I do know that we haven't lost it. It is embodied. And it's my responsibility that I take very seriously to listen to nature and to share it.
Beautiful, thank you. Lee?
To me, this question makes me think, what do I take off the AT and bring back to the matrix of my real life? When I first started hiking the AT, I thought it was going to be all about the trail, the dirt, the rocks, the climbs up the mountains, the descents, the views at the top, which are all great. You have to work to get it, but they're all great. But that's not the greatest thing that I take from the trail. It's the people. It's the people that I meet on the trail. Before I started hiking on the AT or any trails, I had a set viewpoint of life that was pretty rigid and didn't tolerate anyone else's view. And then when I got out on the trail and started talking to people that didn't have the same views as me, I started to realize it's not all about what one view can be. There's many views. So what I take when I go back into the real world is I tell people, get out on the trail, hike, meet the people that are out there. And you may not be so rigid in your views on one specific line of thinking. You're going to get a whole ton of different views, and you may be surprised how many you agree with. That's basically what it means to me.
Thank you.
You know, I think, you know, nature has a whole lot to teach us, but one of the things I think people can gain from getting back to nature, from just being out in the woods, especially if you're alone. I know I try to stay in touch with the trail today, and one of my views is it's much more social than it was when I hiked the trail. Of course, I could go weeks without seeing a soul back then. But when I tell hikers that today, they say you can't go 3 hours without seeing somebody on the trail. But with that socialization, I think it's more difficult to gain knowledge about yourself. I think it's quicker and easier to gain in nature when you can spend some solitude. Not that it can't happen, but one of the things that nature could do, again, especially if you're alone, is it teaches you resourcefulness, and you have to rely on yourself. And certainly in the world today, in society today, I think we need a whole heck of a lot more than that. One of the things I think is a shame today more than ever is people not taking personal responsibility for themselves and not holding themselves accountable for their actions. And I certainly think nature, get out in the woods. It'll take care of that for you. Trust me. And yeah, we all need, we all screw up. We all make mistakes. Take accountability for it and fess up and say, I'm sorry I did this, and how do I make it right? And if we all could do that, and I think nature could teach us that, this world would be a whole lot better.
Thank you. I give a lot of talks on the Appalachian Trail and my experiences, and I think I've touched on something that each of you have said when I give my talks. I appreciate that. We have about 10 more minutes, and I'd like to open it up. If anyone has any particular questions for any of our panelists, feel free to ask them questions. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Wells.
Hi. Mike and I had we didn't exactly cross paths, but we...
Yeah, we kind of did.
We
kind of did, we just didn't know it. Yeah.
And short story is, it's a long story, but the short version is, and it's in my book, which I'll be talking about later on. I had a friend who died in a tragic way in Vermont in 1973, and according to what I had a conversation with Mike, and it was a drowning. It was a drowning. He was coming down from Maine, and Mike went through there the next day, and I didn't know much of any of this until I talked to Mike a couple of minutes. Mike, would you feel comfortable talking about your own sense of what was going on there?
I do, and in '73, the trail, we had a really wet year on the trail. I think every year is wet, but it was 40% of the days I was on the trail were either rain or snow. And when I got up to Vermont had some tremendous flooding. It was the worst flooding the state of Vermont had in over 200 years, and the governor declared the whole state a disaster area. They closed the Green Mountains. They wouldn't let me in the Green Mountains. I had to hold up for a couple days because all the trails, campgrounds, everything were all flooded out. And when I got to the Mill River in Vermont, in the Clarendon Gorge, the suspension bridge over the gorge was totally washed away. There was even no abutments, concrete abutments, anything to even show a sign that a bridge was there. And I looked at a detour which was miles downstream to a concrete road bridge, but I had read that so many bridges, concrete bridges, road bridges were washed away, I couldn't even count on that being there. And a tree had fallen off the top of the cliff on the other side and was laying down in the middle of the water, and I kept looking at it, and I thought if I could get there, I could cross it. And I waited. I decided to do it, and I unhooked my hip belt, of course, and I loosened my shoulder straps on my pack as much as I possibly could, knowing that if I fell off the tree and I fell into the water, that I would certainly die. And I waded up to my waist to get to the tree and then climbed up the other side. When I got off on the other side, there was a gentleman there with a camera and introduced himself as a reporter for the Rutland Daily Herald. And he was down there to take a picture of the tree because the day before, a young hiker from Flemington, New Jersey, Bob Brugman, had fallen off the tree on his way down from Maine and was presumed drowned. The Vermont State Police were leading recovery efforts for his body. He was found 5 days later, 4 miles downstream. And when he told me that story, I was pretty much shook to the core. I couldn't even move my feet for a few minutes, thinking about what I had just did. And that photo not only made the news wires throughout the country, but it was in August of '73. It was on the front cover of the Appalachian Trailway News from the ATC. And today I had the pleasure of meeting Bob's best friend, who's going to talk to you later about his book. So, my entire life, the Appalachian Trail has come back to me in a lot of trail magic stories. And now I have another trail magic story to tell 52 years later. And I'm going to tell this other quick part of the story for the first time, and you haven't even heard this yet. For the 20th anniversary of my hike, Don and I spent a week hiking in the Shenandoahs. No lean-tos, no tents, in lodges by that point. And on the way back, I wanted to stop at ATC headquarters in Harper's Ferry because I never got a copy of the register I signed there for my scrapbook. And she said, "You think they'll have it 20 years later?" I said, "I bet you in 5 minutes they can put their finger on it." And I'm waiting in line, and there was an elderly couple in front of me. And the woman behind the desk says, can I help you? And the gentleman said, "Well, we're here on kind of a sad journey. It's the 20th anniversary of our son's passing, doing what he loved most. He was hiking on the Appalachian Trail when he died. And we were driving up and down the trail celebrating his life." And I politely interrupted. I says, "Excuse me, are you Bob Bruckman's parents?" And the woman turned around and looked at me and she says, "Why, yes, did you know Bob?" And I said, "Would the two of you sit down with me?" I said, "I have a story to tell you." So yeah, a piece of trail magic then, and another piece of trail magic now. You know, pretty incredible how the AT keeps coming back into my life all the time.
There's trail magic where people do a hiker feed, and that's what everybody thinks of, but that's the real trail magic. And I think everyone who's hiked on the trail has some sort of trail magic story that has to do with people not getting fed.
Yeah, in my day, those were examples of trail magic. And somebody taking you into their home and doing your laundry and feeding you and everything else. That was just the kindness of strangers back then.
Yeah, right. Any other questions, anyone? Yes?
So I finished the trail in 79 more miles, right? And I finished in Harper's Ferry about 3 more days. Before I started the trail, I was one of those guys who just go, couldn't stop me, wide open all the time. I guess a month into the trail, I learned patience. I think it's the biggest word on this trail is patience. Y'all agree with it. If you lose patience, you won't finish the trail. You won't, it'll put you off of it so fast. It'll hurt, nutrition, anything. I mean, it taught me patience, it really did. And now at the end of the trail, I have no patience. I'm gonna hurry up and get there. But I believe it's a big word. It taught me that. And you talk about nature when it teaches you, every animal out there's got patience. And I watched that. And it slowed me down.
There's definitely lessons that we learn out there that we can bring back to our regular life.
It's not just that path out there. It's guys like you, guys that walk the trail. That's not made me even come back more and more and more and more. That was my trail magic, was the other hikers.
Great, that's great.
Yeah, nice. That's a great comment. Thanks.
I could tell you a story about how the trail comes back around. This year, all of us were at Trail Days in the authors area there, which they moved to the library, by the way. So if you go there again, it's in the library. It's not in the tent out in the park. We have a little bone of contention with them, but I'm not going to get into that. I wasn't supposed to be a writer this year at Trail Days because I had broke my collarbone a few weeks ago on the flattest trail in Texas. And I just didn't think I'd be able to haul books and stuff like that. But as Trail Days came closer and closer, I was like, at least gotta go. So 2 days before, I just decided I was still in Texas to get in my Jeep and drive up there. And I went in to say hi to some of the people that I'd been authors with there before. And I met Shayla, who actually took my spot for that I gave up. And she so graciously offered to let me sit down next to her, which you're not really supposed to do there. And she's a troublemaker. And I was like, well, I don't have anything to sell. And then I thought, wait, I had like maybe 4 books in the back of my Jeep. So I sat down there and we just had the greatest time. And then she kept saying, I know you from somewhere. And I was like, there's no way you know me. And it turns out in 21 in Bland, Virginia, my wife and I were doing trail magic. Right where you come out near that output store or outfitter store, and Shayla was there at that trail magic, and then I finally remembered when she said something about that. So it's so weird how the trail it goes from Georgia to Maine, but it's also a circle because it always comes back around somewhere later on in your life. It's really weird.
That is the truth, and you never know when you're going to meet somebody again that you've met on the trail.
Exactly.
It's amazing. Well, I want to thank the 4 of you, Mike Rader, Shayla Paradise, John Turner, Lee Lovelace. Thank you so much for your time. It's been wonderful, and If you want to talk to them later, it'll be outside of this particular setting. So thank you everyone for coming.
Welcome, everybody. It's a very interesting transition, I think, between the panel who just spoke, where we heard about personal experiences on the trail from their perspective, and now we're switching to the perspectives through the eyes and ears of two authors written extensively about one hiker on the trail, and to come at it all about Earl Shaffer. So that's what we're doing here today. And we have two people willing to talk to us, and thanks to them, we're going to learn a lot. So David Donaldson on my right, your left, is the biographer of Earl Shaffer. He's a member of the Earl Shaffer Foundation. And then we have Andrea Shapiro, who's written a children's book, beautiful children's book, and illustrated from her perspective on the Appalachian Trail. She's obviously a lover of the trail, as we are all. My name is Greg Cook. I'm a docent at the AT Museum. I think I'm entering my 4th year as a docent now. I love coming here for what I learn and who I meet. It keeps me connected with the world. People say as you get older, it's harder to make friends. That has not been my experience, because I am connected, and I'm so grateful for that. This has been an important thing to do, and I appreciate any of you doing it who would like to. So I think what I'd like to do to start off is just ask each of our authors to explain the titles of their book. David, maybe you could start off with that. You have a particularly interesting title, A Grip on the Mane of Life. Where did that come from?
Hey, is that on?
Yep.
You can hear me okay. Well, first off, thank you to the Appalachian Trail Museum. Thank you, Larry, for having this forum today. It's always an honor for me to get out and be able to share some of my experiences related to the trail and to Earl Shaffer. So thank you everyone for being here and taking time out of your day to be here. So I, along with Maurice J. Forrester, authored the biography, A Grip on the Mane of Life, which Earl had given me permission shortly after the thru hike in 1998 when he and I hiked together to work on his biography. However, as life has a way of doing, I got bogged down with other things like family, kids, and career. And I was introduced to Maurice by Larry. I went up and met him at Williamsport, and an amazing gentleman, one of the most intelligent people I've ever met. And I thought it was a good sign that in every room of the home that they lived in, there were books everywhere. He was extremely well-read on a variety of different topics, and was intimately involved in the trail through activity with certain trails associations in Pennsylvania, as well as serving on the board of managers in the 1970s at ATC. So between the two of us, we collaborated for about 5 years between 2009 and 2014. I provided Maurice with all of the transcripts and background information, interviews with family members, about 30 hours of interviews with Earl, and he put it all together in book form. And as he would finish a section, he would send it to me. He also was in touch with John Shaffer, who was alive at that time, Earl's younger brother, who was a great source of information. And I couldn't be prouder of the association to, have Maurice Forrester as a co-author and as a friend. The title, A Grip on the Mane of Life, if you can, I'll just go ahead and actually read from Maurice's introduction, because he explains exactly where the title came from. Early in June 1948, shortly after passing the midpoint of his walk from Georgia to Maine, Earl Shaffer paused at a trail register to read what previous hikers had written. He was particularly struck by some lines of verse that an enthusiastic hiker had quoted from the poem The Outland Trails by the American poet Henry Herbert Nibbs. Sun and wind and the sound of rain, hunger and thirst and strife. God, to be out on the trails again with a grip on the mane of life. It is easy to see why Earl was attracted to those lines. both his poetry and philosophy. From beginning to end, he had a firm grip on life's mane, even when the ride was rougher than he might have wished. That's the genesis of the title.
Thank you. Andrea?
So to everyone who knew Earl, I did not, but I initially, very early on, contacted the Earl Shaffer Foundation, because when you're dealing to somebody who's such an icon, you want to make sure you get it right. So as time went on, I passed various versions of the story onto them. I think the very first version you guys saw was Walking with Walter, and that was because his best friend, Walter, he, as they were young, planned to hike the trail together, and unfortunately, Walter died at Iwo Jima in World War II. So that iteration of the story, anybody who's an author out there knows stories get rewritten and rewritten and rewritten. Writing is rewriting. So later on, I had a version of the story that I had passed on to a mentor of mine for a critique, and it was called The Crazy One at that point. That was one of his trail names. That was his trail name, Earl's trail name. And I got to the end of my critique, and the person said, who's a children's book author, you know, that's not really what the story's about. And so I said, okay, what am I really writing about? And so I thought, okay, Earl's hike was about partly his, it was about a lot of things, but partly it was about his emotional, where he wanted to be, where he was at the time. And the trail's about 2,000 miles long, so it became 2,000 miles to happy.
Thank you, Andrea. I'd like to ask a question of both of you, an overall question to start, and that is, what do you hope your readers take away from your book?
Yeah, that's, for me, a difficult question to answer. One of the challenges I realized early on in the process of trying to create a biography is, how do you really capture a person's life, especially somebody like Earl, who lived for 83 years and had the various experiences that he had? You know, the cadences of how he spoke, how passionate he was on certain subjects. So I had to realize that that was an impossibility. It was not going to be possible for people to understand. Whenever Earl referred to the Appalachian Trail, it was the Appalachian Trail. And he said he pronounced it that way because of the Appalachian Indian tribe down in Florida, and that mountain chain was simply an extension of the name of the tribe. And he felt that people were mispronouncing it when they said Appalachian Trail. So I try to, when I give presentations, to remember that and refer to it as the Appalachian Trail. But as I was telling somebody earlier, if I'm talking to somebody else, I just say Appalachian. So how do you capture all those things in a book? So I had a really unique perspective, hiking with Earl, getting to know Earl after the trail, and for whatever reason, Earl trusted me. His brother and his other family members told me that. I would drive up from where I was living in Virginia, 2 hours north, to visit him. In Pennsylvania, I had a tape recorder. I would ask him anything and everything. Typical example would be, hey, Earl, what was it like growing up in the Depression? He might start out talking about working on a mule-drawn buckboard thresher at the age of 12, and then he might wind up talking about Jackie Robinson and somebody he met in World War II, and then go back to the trail and then go back to the Depression. It was a great experience for me to get to meet him, and what this biography is hoping to do is to pass on some of his legacy. I think he was an amazing man, and the experiences of his life and what he did with the trail, and particularly with his poetry and his service in World War II. And I felt it was important. I think Earl felt it was important. Maurice, John Shaffer felt it was important to put his story out there and as close as possible to what his words and thoughts and wishes would have been.
Yeah, thank you, David. And Andrew, before we move on, I realized I need to set a little bit of context for people who are not as familiar with Earl Shaffer as we are. So Earl Shaffer was the first hiker who registered and completed the trek in one fell swoop. He did that in 1948. He did that after military service. You two may want to talk more about his motivation for wanting to hike the trail. At that time, it was considered impossible. He was told it was impossible. Hiking the trail from end to end was never, I always tell visitors to the museum, it was never the intent of the founders that this would be the way the trail would be used. Rather, it was a place for city dwellers to experience the healing power of nature near where they lived, and they envisioned maybe a day or so out on the trail, maybe a weekend, maybe a week, but certainly not a through hike, which we emphasize today. But that was, of course, part of the challenge for the first hiker. When Earl heard that it was considered impossible, to him and his personality, that was just the challenge. Well, of course, I'm going to prove them wrong, and I'm going to hike that trail. So you guys can talk about the personality a little bit in all of that. He hiked the trail 2 more times. The last time that he hiked, he was age 79. David knew him and hiked with him on the last portion of that trail, and was with him when he died. I want to say something about that because that's a very touching story. I wanted to mention too that the museum has a shelter built on the first floor that Earl built, and we reconstructed, pulled off the trail and reconstructed out of timbers. And then outside the museum this last year or so, we've been working to rebuild a stone shelter. The stones were just a pile until recently, and now the walls are built and the ceiling, the roof is on. Its roof is made of tin, and it just went up this year, still under construction. So if you have a chance, take a look at that too. That's pretty new. So with that background, I'm sorry to interrupt, Andrea, but maybe you could tell us what you hope your readers will take away from the book.
Sure. My readers are children, the parents of those children, the what we call gatekeepers, the parents, the librarians, the teachers, and what do we want those kids to take from that? And being raised by a father who took us camping, who took us hiking. I remember I grew up near Bear Mountain, and the AT goes through Bear Mountain in New York. And I know there's more than one Bear Mountain, guys. And I remember he pointed to what I know now was a blaze, and he said, "That's the trail that goes from Georgia to Maine." I said, "What?" You know? So I even early on knew about the AT. About, I guess it was 12 years ago, I started writing, and I decided I wanted to focus on writing for children because I think that's very important, and also people who write for children are really nice people. And so I was at a workshop, and I was working on a book, a fiction book about a couple of people, like 17, 18-year-olds who were through hiking the AT. I was at this workshop, and everybody else at the workshop was writing nonfiction picture books. And I thought, well, I kind of want to try that. So I was talking to the person who ran the workshop, and I kind of pitched a few ideas at her, and then I talked about Earl and the first through hike of the Appalachian Trail. And she said, "Oh, well, that sounds good." And it took me, as I said, many years to actually find the story in there. But I think what I wanted to link in this was that somebody can do something that hasn't been done before, that everybody thinks they're crazy to try to do, and how that can heal them, and how we have to have this nature. I think some people who were speaking in the earlier panel talked about the patience that nature teaches, and how connecting with nature changes their lives, all the good and bad experiences they have. And that I wanted to make in a way that kids would have that just in the back of their minds as they're thinking about how to incorporate that into their lives and how that can help them, and parents to be able to relate to that too.
Great, thanks for both of you. You know, you both kind of touched on this, but is there anything more you could tell us about your motivation for writing the books?
Well, for me, I always viewed it as a gift that Earl would even grant me permission to write his biography. Earl was an accomplished writer himself. He'd already been published, Walking with Spring. After he finished the hike in '98, he got an offer to do another book. So it's rather intimidating to ask someone that you know is a writer themselves to write their story. In fact, before I asked Earl, I talked to his brother John about the idea, and he thought it was a good idea. And I can remember with some apprehension asking Earl, hey, what would you think? You have so many incredible stories. They really need to be preserved. And he kind of hemmed and hawed, and then, you know, finally, he reluctantly agreed. And so the task after that was then to try to capture as much of the man as I could.
Just echoing that, dealing with somebody who was such a poet and a raconteur, and my secondhand ability to understand him through books like this, and his poetry, to take these and take what I would call his voice and be true to that in a way to communicate to kids. That was part of my challenge and my pleasure in doing it.
So in preparation for this event, I started by reading Earl Shaffer's book, Walking with Spring. So I would encourage anyone to read that classic, and you will realize that as much as we remember Earl Shaffer, the man, for his thru hike experience, he viewed himself primarily as a poet and an author, not as a hiker. And that's fascinating to me. So I had that understanding before I read both of your books. So what I'm wanting to ask about now is more about that side of his life. So I found this interesting that when Earl's mother taught him to read before he went to school, she had him copy poems and to teach him how to learn to read and write, and which Earl described as explaining his proclivity for poetry. And I was wondering if David in particular, if you could talk about Earl's younger years and his poetic side.
Yeah, Earl was born in November of 1918, November 8th, 3 days before the end of World War I. And 3 days prior to the end of the war, there was a rumor going around that was broadcast on the radio that the war had ended. In fact, it was a false armistice. However, to honor that, Earl's parents gave him the middle name of Victor. And Earl grew up first 5 years of his life on King Street in downtown York. When he was about 5, his family decided to move way out into the wilds, 3 miles away, Shiloh, Pennsylvania. They moved onto a 7-acre truck farm. Earl grew up taking care of various animals and farming, as well as walking to school. He met his best friend Walter, who lived right next door to him there, and where he grew up had a tremendous influence on his later life. His mother also, he said, was the singular most important influence on his life, and if you'd like, I have a poem I'd like to share that he had written to his mom.
Sure, absolutely.
Called As the Twig Is Bent. Mom, did you somehow realize from my earliest childhood days, from the time I was knee-high sized till the time you went away, that in spite of my rowdy quirks and apparent stubbornness, that of all the people on this earth, it was you I loved this best. When you had me copy poetry, did you know when I was grown, those early dreams would remain with me and I'd write some of my own. Mom, were you wise enough to know, as the ancient proverb told, train up a child in the way to go, and he'll follow it when he's old. Earl's mom passed away in 1933 when Earl was 14 years old, which in anybody's child's development, that's a really critical age, and he was very deeply wounded by that loss, as well as later on the loss of his friend Walter. And I think those two losses really affected him. Earl was known to be a loner, although if he was around a group of hikers, you'd never know it. but his mom was the single greatest influence in his life.
So, no, just not about his childhood, but also about poetry. I wanted to put something of Earl's writing in the book, but to find a place that wouldn't interrupt the flow, it is on the back cover and also in the back matter. So when Earl got to the place that he knew he could finish, because as has been said, nobody had done it before, it wasn't seen as something you did. So what he did is he wrote a postcard to the AT conference, which is now the AT Conservancy. Got that right? Yes. Yeah, thanks. And on the postcard was a little drawing and a poem. And it didn't say, I'm out here, I'm hiking it, I'm doing this, you know. It was, the flowers bloom, the songbirds sing, and though it rain, sun or rain, I walk the mountaintops with spring, from Georgia north to Maine. And that was his message to the world, what would become later. And that original postcard is lost, yeah, but they have a sketch of it in the book.
We made a sketch.
You made a sketch of what you imagined it would be, yeah. And that was part of my inspiration.
And Andrea, I'd like to invite you to read some of the excerpts from your book.
Sure.
Whenever you feel like that's appropriate.
Sure, okay. So this is not the way you read a children's picture book, because children's picture books are about the pictures. So I apologize for that up ahead of time. I'll try to hold things up. And people often ask me, am I an illustrator? And I say, absolutely not. Rebecca Harnish is the illustrator, and she is a thru hiker. And I found her through an issue of the AT Journeys magazine, and had the great opportunity to work very, very closely with her, which is not usual for an author to work with an illustrator. So if you want to ask me more about that, I'll tell you. The mountains called to Earl Shaffer when he was a boy. He followed forest trails, slept beneath starry skies, and warmed his hands by a glowing campfire. In those mountains, Earl was happy. Just got to point out, I don't mention it, but one of those people is Walter, and one's his brother. Earl made a plan, big as those mountains, wide as the sky, and glorious as all outdoors. One day he'd hike the Appalachian Trail from Georgia all the way to Maine. Those distant peaks called when Earl was a man, lonely and afraid, while he fought a war on far-off Pacific Isles. When he returned home, tired and sad, the Appalachian Trail called once more. Maybe those mountains could make him happy again. 14 states, 2,000 miles, 5 million steps. Impossible. No one had done it before, but Earl would try. So, on a blustery April morning in 1948, Earl stood on a Georgia mountain peak beside a weather-beaten sign with a pack on his back and only the birds for company. Earl passed a family picnicking by a lake. Where are you headed? The man asked. To Maine, Earl said. The woman laughed. Glad I got better sense. Maybe he was crazy, but he hitched up his pack and hiked north. So I'm going to skip to there, and spoiler alert, he makes it, okay? The middle is more struggle, but more rain in Connecticut. Earl still had 500 miles to go. A wire fence blocked his way, so he dropped to his belly and crawled through the mud. His murky mood was as gray as the sky, until a man invited him inside. They shared cookies and coffee and swapped stories of a far-off war. Earl's gloom parted like the clouds, and he was on his way once more. A warm breeze in Massachusetts and white birches in Vermont turned to cold gales and spruce thickets in New Hampshire. His boots were cracked. He carried a smoke-stained pack, and his cooking kit was dented and black. Earl was tired, but he still had 300 miles to go. One more state, Maine. One more mountain, Katahdin, one more mile. Up, up, up. Giant boulders blocked the way. A strong wind pushed, Earl pushed back, step by step by step. 4 months, 4 days, 4 hours, through rain, wind, and cold. On a sunny afternoon in August afternoon in 1948, beside another weather-beaten sign, patchwork lakes listen below. A yodel floated up the mountain, and Earl yodeled back. He knew the trail would call again. To walk under snow-white clouds, to drink from cold mountain streams, to feel the earth beneath his feet. Because in those mountains, Earl found peace, Earl felt free, Earl was happy.
So, Earl's motivation for his hike is often described as walking off the war. I was wondering if you in particular, David, could explain what that means.
Sure. Earl volunteered for the service in April of 1941, which was several months before the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. His reasoning was because he had a low draft number, he couldn't get a job, he figured he was going to get drafted anyhow. He foresaw the U.S. getting involved in World War II, so he thought, what the heck, I may as well just go ahead and enlist. So that's what he did. He was assigned into the Signal Corps. He was stationed on some 22 different islands in the Pacific Theater. And during that time, he said he never got a furlough. He said it was a matter of he would be out on an assignment working on radar installations, and by the time he got back, he hadn't gotten the paperwork in, or the paperwork was in, but his furlough was over. So he described himself as being half mad from serving in the war. Of course, he lost his friend Walter. There were some instances where he would be on a radar tower on an island, and yet there could be still some fighting on, say, the far end of an island. All of those experiences that he saw, the death, I think it really, really hit him hard, really depressed him. And so when he came back, his family said that he was never quite the same. He was never really able, in their opinion, to sort of socially readjust. He wasn't able to hold a regular job. They said he would spend a lot of time really, really quiet. They said he was always quiet by nature, but they said times he would just take off. He had a motorcycle, 1934 Harley Davidson Flathead that he bought. He would take off for days at a time. Nobody would know where he was. No doubt he had what we now call post-traumatic stress syndrome. But back then, you were just considered to be shell-shocked or eccentric. In 1947, Earl saw a blurb in a magazine, and it was called the Long Trails Challenge. And very short, one paragraph blurb saying that the Appalachian Trail had never been hiked in one entire season. And Earl said he was in the living room, and his brother John was there, and John verified the story, and Earl said right after he had that, well, you know what, it says here nobody's ever hiked the trail before, so maybe if I take along a camera with me and I keep a journal and I can incorporate some of my poetry into it, maybe I'll be able to get published. So that was a prime motivation for Earl to hike the trail. Earl considered himself first and foremost, as you mentioned, an author and a publisher. One time I was asking him, did he ever regret not getting married and having children? And he got very quiet, and he said in a very soft voice, the poems, they are my children. So he felt very intimately connected with his writing, and there's no doubt in my mind he was an absolute creative genius. So what I really think Earl's motivation was, this would be a way for him to have some of his poetry published. During the war, he authored some 400 poems alone. Not blood and guts kind of thing, but talking about what the sea looked like over an atoll that he was on, or describing what the crew members of the B-8 crew looked like, B-24 crew looked like. So he had that to share with the world, and that was his motivation. I think, however, as he was walking along with the experiences he had, meeting the people he had, being able to share his experiences with veterans that he met on the trail, helped him release a lot of that. I think when he was done with the trail, he realized that a lot of the angst and a lot of the feelings that he had coming back from the war had dissipated somewhat. So I think his hike was twofold. I think, yes, he definitely wanted to get himself right after going through that experience of World War II, but then I think he also saw the hike as a vehicle whereby some of his poetry could become published.
Thank you.
And where also that he felt that the trail restored his faith in humanity?
Absolutely.
2 days ago, as I was working in the museum, volunteering, a man came in late in the day and he was very fit, didn't say very much. He knew what he was there for. He wanted to buy some hats. He went over to buy some hats. And I said, well, it really looks like you know what you're here for. And he said, yes, I'm part of Wounded, the veterans group, Wounded Warriors. Warrior Expedition, thank you. And it just, hearing you talk about Earl's reaction to World War II reminded me that this is a need that is still being met by the Appalachian Trail.
Yeah, I think maybe one of the unintended consequences that Earl discovered was the therapeutic aspect of what that amount of time in solitude and connecting with yourself can bring as far as a sense of inner peace. You know, I certainly experienced that on my thru hike. Listening to the members of the panel before, it had a huge impact on their life. If I hadn't hiked the trail, I would not be here right now. So I cannot even imagine all the myriad of ways that hiking the Appalachian Trail that I did has changed my life. It's just been profound.
You know, Earl was a word person, of course, so Andrea, I know you're a word person. So you in particular, I think, might like this question. And it has to do with the names that Earl used to apply to himself and his walk in 1948. I'll just read some of the words that I found in his book and ask you, Andrea, if you would to comment on those, especially his trail name and what that means. So he described himself, he called his first thru hike on the AT the Long Cruise, the Long Expedition, the Lone Expedition. The world outside the trail was the Dismal Swamp. He called himself Ridge Runner, a term we use today, Lone Trail Hiker, and Forest Rover. His trail name was Crazy One. So I'm wondering, Andrea, could you comment on those names? Which one might be your favorite and what's up with his trail name?
Well, I mean, I have to say the Crazy One, obviously, because I was going to use it as my title. I would also say that titles are extremely important to me. A title, I don't know what I'm writing until I know the title, or I don't really understand my book until I understand the title. And I go through that a lot. So I think in calling himself something, correct me if I'm wrong, he didn't start calling himself Crazy One. That sort of became what people were calling him, or I'm gonna refer that one back to you.
Well, as far as trail names go, I mean, Warren Doyle or Larry would probably know better what the genesis of trail names was. I'm not sure if it was a thing that started in the 70s or 80s. But anyhow, were you finished with your answer, Andrea?
Only in that I don't want to claim that that's what he called himself, or that because he did this 3 times, that's what people started calling him. But either way, I think in adopting a name, we say something about ourselves. And when people who hike the trail adopt a trail name, they're saying something about their intention. And I think in taking that, it was, all right, you think I'm crazy? Fine. This is what I do. This is who I am. Whatever the world wants to think of me as fine because I'm happy with who I am. Do I understand that correctly? So in that, I would say that's my hook on it.
So, yeah, just add on to that, I can recall Earl telling me one time, I think it was in the 1980s, Gene Espy, who was the second through hiker of the Appalachian Trail, he and Earl were great friends. When Gene hiked in 1951, he had no idea who Earl was. He did not know that anybody had ever through hiked previous to his own through hike. And so when they did meet, they struck up a great friendship over the years. And Earl was telling me, I think again at a meeting, 1980s perhaps, he and Gene were talking, and there were, of course, several hikers around and asking them questions. They created a big buzz. And Earl said to Gene, well, I guess, you know, you and I are the first crazies who started this whole thing. So for all I know, that may have been the genesis of where he decided to call himself Crazy One, because I think by that time the tradition of naming yourself with the trail name was already established. But actually, to go back to where Crazy One even comes from, if you don't mind, I'm just going to read a little excerpt from Walking with Spring. Now, whenever Earl would tell this story, he would always use a faux Southern accent. So I'll try to channel some of that, but my apologies to you if you're from the South. Beyond the rise, a family of three was setting out on a picnic lunch. As I was passing, the man looked up and said casually, "Howdy, where are you heading?" Just as casually, I replied, "To Maine." A poke in the solar plexus would have produced the same result. His jaw sagged and his eyes widened. When informed of my trek, he admitted he had never heard of the Appalachian Trail. Meanwhile, the lady just stood there and stared. Suddenly she spoke. "Y'all mean to say you're walking all the way to Maine, over the mountains, all by yourself, and carrying that a thing?" Sorry. That's how Earl would say it. The answer was obvious. "Yes, ma'am." She stared a moment longer, shook her head, and chuckled. "I'm glad I got sense, mister. I'm glad I got sense." And that was Earl's genesis of proclaiming himself.
And Andrea,
I want to say, and that's my homage to that I put in here, because to me that did say, yeah, I'm maybe crazy, but I'm going. Yeah.
He was proud of it.
So we wanted to leave a little bit of time for questions. So I'm just going to close now with a poem that Earl wrote that I think applies to us today as well as when it was written. And then, you know, if people have questions, please pipe up. This poem is called The Somewhere Trail. There's a footloose pathway filing out across the future years, its impartial lure beguiling unto laughter, dearth, or tears, branching widely unto somewhere, east or west or south or north, for the faithful who will find there that for which they venture forth. There are unfound treasures waiting in some yet untrespassed land, for which fate is contemplating an adventure still unplanned. Take the somewhere trail to nowhere. Take the high roads wild and free, and perhaps I'll meet you out there if the fates should so decree. There's a trail out through the darkness to a land of dawning hope, to the widening horizons of a broader, clearer scope, out across the petty wrangling to a truer, closer bond of the long reluctant changeling with the waiting host beyond. There are havens free from conflict. There's right to live and grow, where is found the peace intrinsic, such as men by right should know. Take the somewhere trail of learning through the corridor of dawn, where the flame of truth is burning, beckoning forever on. Earl V. Shaffer.
Earl authored something on the order of 1,300 and some poems, and you know, obviously some are, you know, better, more finished than others, but this is, and always has been, my personal favorite. In fact, Earl said that this was the first complete poem he ever wrote. Wanderer's quest. Somewhere on this earth there's a valley that's peaceful and fair, where everyone's friendly and all quickly rally if danger or trouble comes there, where no one is selfish and no one is cruel, and greed for wealth is unknown, where no one's a genius, no one a fool, and only true kindness is shown. A clear stream is flowing between lofty ranges, well timbered with maple and pine. A vista serene, where life never changes, where leisure and peace will be mine. Long have I sought for that lone hidden valley, but always have sought it in vain. Yet each disappointment will cause me to rally and eagerly seek it again. Wanderer's Quest by Earl Shaffer.
If you ever get down to DC and you want to see the actual paper that he wrote and he corrected and he rewrote and he rewrote in his letters to publishers, the American History Museum at the down in Smithsonian, and you can go and ask to see the stuff and bring it out for you, and you can see his boots too. And, thank you.
If Earl were living today, any thoughts about how he would view the trail as a speed challenge that we're seeing today, with people trying to set shortest known hikes over the trail every year, and with all kinds of support in running and technology?
Gosh, if Earl were living today, he'd be 106 years old. You know, Benton McKay, I think, wrote that they should give a prize out, not to the person who hikes the trail the fastest, but who hikes it the slowest. That's sort of what my philosophy is, and I can't speak for Earl, but I imagine that would probably be similar to, you know, what Benton McKay expressed.
And I'd second that. If you look at Earl again as a writer, as a poet, he understood that you don't just dash it off on a piece of paper. It takes time, it takes rewriting, it takes consideration, reflecting. And I would just take what I know about him as a writer and say, well, how could that not apply to his life on the trail?
And I just want to add there, because I know we have like an awesome hiker here that, you know, I mean, I find it incredible that people can hike the trail as fast as they do. You know, of course, I also love what Benton McKay said, you know, hike the trail so you can see what you see. And yeah, people are motivated, I guess, to use the trail differently.
What is Earl's epitaph?
Earl's epitaph. Well, he has a rather simple U.S. government-issued headstone. It simply has his name and the dates. There's no other markings on it, but if I were to propose one, I think I would use the words on the back cover of Andrea's book that she read for us a little bit earlier. The flowers bloom, the songbirds sing. And though it's sun or rain, I walk the mountaintops of spring, from Georgia north to Maine.
Well, thanks everybody for coming. I think lunch is next.
Lunch is courtesy of the Earl Shaffer Foundation. At lunchtime, we're going to have a performance by Tom Jolin, a local musician who's played at various A2 museum events over the years. And I think you're in for a wonderful treat, you know, with Tom's performance at lunchtime. Thanks.